This section addresses a number of important considerations that you'll want to think about when working up your research methods or research methodologies section of your dissertation. A number of topic areas are covered, one of which is the advantage of anticipatory writing. I'll come back to that in a minute. Other topics include important considerations when it comes to ethics, considerations of paradigms, research design, data collection and implementation. Let's think about the anticipatory writing aspect. It is covered in the materials, but I'd like to just bring this to your attention. I think one of the nice things about a research methodologies section is that you can begin to write drafts of this pretty early on. And so it can be one of the first sections that you do actually write, because you can initially write in an anticipatory sense, in the sense that you don't need to have actually conducted your research at the time you write up your intentions, if you like, what you're hoping to do with your research. And I think it's kind of useful to do that rather than to wait and conduct your research first, because it's harder to remember once you've conducted your research. It's kind of harder to remember what you were thinking and what kind of considerations informed your thinking, at the point at which you were designing all this and developing your research ideas. So it's a really, really good idea to write about your intentions in an anticipatory sense. Subsequently, as the materials suggest, you can then go on and correct it so it becomes like past tense rather than anticipatory, what you did, because it sounds more purposeful. But it's really useful to think of the research methods section as something that is quite usefully written about, initially at least, before you actually conduct your research. Finally, I'd just like to draw your attention to the bullet point list early on in this section, which addresses some of the things that you ought to think about putting into your research methods section discussion. Top of that list is why you've chosen particular primary research methods. It's sort of rationale, a justification for the approach you've employed. But also it's appropriate to comment on why you've rejected other potentially viable research methods. It's your opportunity in this section to talk about how you've designed your research, whether that's questionnaires, approaches in an observational setting, the sample selection, tools and instruments, etc. And why you've designed any of this the way that you have. It's an appropriate place to talk about anticipated limits of what your research can possibly reveal. Notice the emphasis on the word anticipated. There may be problems that emerge when you actually conduct your research, but this is about what you manage to anticipate, what you can foresee. So it's your chance to comment on how you aim to prevent foreseeable problems that could in some small way compromise the validity and reliability of your results. Certainly the research methods section is appropriate for the consideration of ethical issues and for you to comment on how you've designed ethical good practices, how they've been inbuilt into your study. And maybe it's an opportunity to talk about any choices that you've made with regard to certain types of primary evidence. I'm not really talking about, favouring internet-based sources over printed sources. I'm really talking about if there's a big literature out there on the topic, maybe choices you've made to help you narrow it down in terms of where you're focusing your research. And certainly, of course, it's appropriate for you to discuss the methodological aspect of your whole research approach, and that will inevitably, I think, include paradigms which will be discussed elsewhere.